The cold water of the Snake River lapped at Mary Stone's trembling ankles as she stood barefoot on the muddy bank, her wedding dress torn and sodden, clinging to her shivering form like a shroud of broken promises. The setting sun cast long shadows across the Wyoming Territory, turning the landscape into a painting of oranges and purples that might have been beautiful if she hadn't been abandoned, penniless, and alone in this wilderness. It was 1878, and Mary had traveled all the way from Boston to marry a man she'd never met, a cattle rancher who'd advertised for a mail-order bride in the Eastern papers. His letters had been so charming, so full of promises about their life together. But when she'd arrived in the frontier town of Clearwater after weeks of grueling travel, there had been no one waiting for her. Only whispers from the townspeople about how Jacob Miller had skipped town 2 weeks prior, owing money to half the businesses and taking off with a saloon girl. So here she stood, having fled the cruel laughter and pitying stares of the townspeople, with nowhere to go and no way to return east. Her trunk with what few possessions she'd brought was still at the stagecoach office, held until she could pay the remaining fare money she didn't have. "Madam." "You all right?" The deep voice startled Mary so badly she nearly toppled into the river. She whirled around to find a tall man on horseback watching her with concerned eyes. He sat atop a dappled gray stallion, his silhouette rimmed with the golden light of the setting sun. A weathered cowboy hat shadowed his face, but she could make out a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of beard. "I'm perfectly fine," Mary replied, her teeth chattering, betraying the lie. Pride was all she had left, and she clung to it fiercely. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing broad shoulders and a lean frame. As he stepped closer, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps around 25, only a few years older than her 21 years. "Begging your pardon, but you don't look fine. You look half frozen and a mile from anywhere." His eyes, a startling blue in his tanned face, swept over her bedraggled appearance. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his long brown duster coat and held it out. "Take this before you catch your death." Mary hesitated, years of proper Boston upbringing warning against accepting anything from a strange man. But the biting chill of the evening air and the genuine concern in his eyes overcame her reservations. She reached for the coat with trembling fingers. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton." "Wyatt Thornton." He draped the coat around her shoulders, the warm weight of it immediately soothing against her cold skin. It smelled of leather, horses, and pine scents she was quickly learning define the West. "And you might be Mary Stone," she replied, clutching the coat tighter. "Recently arrived from Boston and, as it turns out, recently abandoned." The words came out more bitter than she intended. Wyatt's expression darkened. "You're Miller's bride." It wasn't a question, and Mary felt her cheeks flush with humiliation. News travels fast. Small towns. He shrugged apologetically. "Not much stays secret for long." He looked toward the river, then back at her. "What are you doing out here? Clearwater's 3 miles back." Mary lifted her chin. "I needed to think, to decide what to do next." The truth that she'd run blindly from town until her feet were raw, until her tears had dried on her cheeks, and all that remained was a hollow despair, seemed too pathetic to admit. Wyatt studied her for a moment, then nodded as if he'd made up his mind about something. "Well, Miss Stone, it's getting dark, and these parts aren't safe for anyone to be wandering alone, let alone a city lady. My ranch is closer than town. I can offer you a hot meal, a place to sleep, and tomorrow I'll take you wherever you want to go." Mary stiffened. "I couldn't possibly. I've got a housekeeper, Mrs. Hernandez. Been with my family since I was a boy. You'll be proper as Sunday service." His mouth quirked in a half-smile. "I'm not in the habit of leaving people stranded, especially not ladies." Mary looked back toward the town she couldn't see, then at the darkening wilderness around them. She had few options, and this cowboy, this Wyatt Thornton, was offering safety, at least for the night. "I accept your hospitality, Mr. Thornton. Thank you." He nodded, satisfied, and led her to his horse. With strong hands that were surprisingly gentle, he helped her mount, then swung up behind her. The closeness of their bodies made Mary tense, but as they rode through the gathering twilight, the steady rhythm of the horse and the warmth of the man at her back began to ease her fears. The Thornton ranch appeared as they crested a rise, a sturdy log home with smoke curling from the chimney. A large barn and several outbuildings spread across a valley. Lamplight glowed warm in the windows, and Mary felt a pang of longing for the home she'd imagined sharing with her intended husband. As they approached, a stout woman with silver-streaked black hair emerged from the house, her hands on her hips. Wyatt Thornton. "You're late for supper again," and she stopped abruptly when she spotted Mary. "Dios mío, what have you brought home now, Mrs. Hernandez? This is Miss Mary Stone. She's had some trouble and needs a place for the night," Wyatt explained as he dismounted, then reached up to help Mary down. "Miss Stone, this is Elena Hernandez, the woman who's kept me alive and relatively civilized since my parents passed." The older woman's expression softened as she took in Mary's bedraggled appearance. "Come inside, child. We'll get you warmed up and fed." Within half an hour, Mary found herself seated at a solid oak table, wearing a borrowed dress of Mrs. Hernandez's that was slightly too short and too wide but blissfully dry. A bowl of hearty stew steamed before her, and fresh bread sat on a plate nearby. Wyatt sat across from her, his presence both reassuring and unnerving. "I've prepared the guest room," Mrs. Hernandez announced, bustling back into the dining room. "It hasn't been used in some time, but the sheets are clean." "Thank you," Mary said softly. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." "No need," Wyatt replied, breaking off a piece of bread. "Anyone would do the same." "Not everyone," Mary said, thinking of the townspeople who had watched her humiliation with barely concealed amusement. A comfortable silence fell as they ate. Mary hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first spoonful of stew passed her lips. As her immediate needs for warmth and food were met, her mind began to work on her predicament. She had no money, no prospects, and no way home. Her parents had scraped together what little they had to send her west for a better life. She couldn't return to them in disgrace. "Mr. Thornton," she began hesitantly, "do you know of any work in the area? For a woman, I mean." Wyatt looked up from his stew, his blue eyes thoughtful. "What skills do you have?" Mary considered. "I can read and write well. I've managed household accounts. I can sew, though I'm not particularly talented at it. I've taught children their letters." She paused, then admitted, "I'm not very practical, I'm afraid." "Boston didn't prepare me for frontier life." "You'd be surprised what people can adapt to," Wyatt said. "Clearwater has a schoolhouse but no teacher at present. The last one married a silver prospector and moved to Nevada last spring." Hope flickered in Mary's chest. "Do you think they might consider me?" "It's possible. Town council's been looking. Pay isn't much, but it comes with a small cabin behind the schoolhouse." He took a sip of coffee. "I could introduce you to Mayor Bennett tomorrow if you like." For the first time that day, Mary felt a small measure of control return to her life. "I would appreciate that very much." Later that night, lying in the guest room bed with moonlight streaming through the curtains, Mary reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. She'd come west to be a wife, and now she might become a schoolteacher instead. The humiliation of being jilted still stung, but beneath it was a whisper of something that felt strangely like relief. Jacob Miller had been a fantasy, a collection of charming letters and promises. But what if the reality of him would have been a disappointment or worse? Her thoughts drifted to her rescuer. Wyatt Thornton was unlike any man she'd met in Boston. There was a straightforward quality to him, a lack of pretense that was both disconcerting and refreshing. And he'd given her his coat without hesitation, a simple act of kindness when she needed it most. Morning came with the crowing of roosters and the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Mary found a simple dress laid out for her, one that fit better than Mrs. Hernandez's, with a note explaining it had belonged to Wyatt's sister, who now lived in Denver with her husband. When she emerged from her room, Wyatt was already seated at the table, a newspaper spread before him. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, at seeing her in proper clothes with her hair neatly braided. "Good morning," she said, suddenly shy. "Morning." He stood, pulling out a chair for her. "Sleep well." "Better than I expected." She settled into the chair. "Thank you for the dress. I'll return it before I leave." Wyatt waved away her concern. "Sarah hasn't worn it in years. She'd be pleased it's being used." Mrs. Hernandez appeared with a plate of eggs and bacon, setting it before Mary with a maternal smile. "Eat, eat." "You're too thin." Mary couldn't help but smile back. "Thank you, Mrs. Hernandez." As they ate breakfast, Wyatt outlined his plan for the day. "I need to check on some cattle in the north pasture first, then we can head into town. Mayor Bennett usually takes his lunch at the hotel restaurant around noon." "I don't want to disrupt your work," Mary protested. "It's no trouble. I was planning to go into town anyway. Need supplies." He folded his newspaper. "Besides, I'm curious to see Bennett's face when I present him with the answer to the town's schoolteacher problem." After breakfast, Mary helped Mrs. Hernandez with the dishes despite the older woman's protests, and then Wyatt showed her around the ranch while waiting for the appropriate time to head to town. The Thornton property was impressive, several hundred acres with a healthy herd of cattle, a small orchard, and even a spring-fed pond. "Your family built all this?" Mary asked as they walked back toward the house. "My father did, mostly. Came out here in '49 when there was nothing but wilderness. Met my mother in Clearwater. She was the daughter of the first doctor in these parts." Pride was evident in his voice. "I was born right in that house, and so was my sister." "And your parents?" Mary asked, noticing he spoke of them in the past tense. A shadow crossed his face. "Fever took them both 3 years ago, within weeks of each other. Sarah was already married by then, left me with the ranch." "I'm sorry," Mary said softly. He nodded in acknowledgement but didn't dwell on it. "We should head to town. I've hitched the wagon." The ride to Clearwater took almost an hour, giving Mary time to appreciate the beauty of the landscape she'd been too distraught to notice the day before. Rolling hills covered in grass that rippled like water in the breeze, stands of pine trees, and in the distance, the jagged silhouette of mountains against the clear blue sky. "It's beautiful here," she admitted. "Different from the east, but beautiful in its own way." Wyatt glanced at her, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Most Easterners only see the harshness at first." "Oh, I see that too," Mary said with a laugh. "But there's something honest about it. The land doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is." "Unlike some people," Wyatt said, and Mary knew he was thinking of Jacob Miller. As they approached Clearwater, Mary's anxiety returned. The town looked different in daylight, less intimidating but more real. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, going about their business. A few turned to watch as Wyatt's wagon rolled down the main street. "First stop, the stagecoach office," Wyatt announced. "We should collect your trunk." Mary's heart sank. "I can't pay the fare they're holding it against. I had just enough for a room until my wedding." Wyatt's jaw tightened. Miller should have paid that. Before she could protest, he had stopped the wagon in front of a small building with Clearwater Stage and Mail painted on the window. He jumped down and offered her his hand. "Come on, let's see what we're dealing with." Inside, a thin man with spectacles and a green eyeshade looked up from his ledger. "Mr. Thornton," he acknowledged, then his eyes widened when he saw Mary. "Miss Stone, I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "Mr. Perkins," Mary greeted him, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "We've come for Miss Stone's trunk," Wyatt said without preamble. The clerk adjusted his spectacles. "There's the matter of the outstanding fare." Wyatt pulled out a leather wallet and counted out several bills. "Will this cover it?" "Mr. Thornton, no," Mary protested, but he ignored her. The clerk counted the money, then nodded. "That's settled then. The trunk's in the back. I'll have Billy bring it out to your wagon." Outside again, Mary turned to Wyatt, mortification and gratitude warring within her. "I can't accept that, it's too much." "Consider it a loan then," Wyatt said easily. "You can pay me back when you start earning a teacher's salary." His confidence that she would secure the position was both comforting and nerve-wracking. "And if I don't get the job, then we'll figure something else out." The simplicity with which he said it, as if her problems were now somehow partly his responsibility, left Mary speechless. Their next stop was the hotel restaurant, an unexpectedly elegant establishment with tablecloths and silverware that wouldn't have looked out of place in a modest Boston dining room. Mayor Bennett, a portly man with an impressive mustache, was indeed taking his lunch there. When he spotted Wyatt, he waved them over. "Thornton, good to see you in town, and who is your lovely companion, Mayor Bennett? May I introduce Miss Mary Stone? She's recently arrived from Boston and has experience teaching children." The mayor's eyebrows shot up. "Is that so? Miss Stone, please join me. We have much to discuss." The next hour passed in a blur as Mary found herself interviewed for the position of Clearwater's schoolteacher. Mayor Bennett was impressed by her education and articulate speech, and by the end of the meal, he was offering her the job. "It's not much, $20 a month plus the cabin. School term runs September through May, but we keep the position year-round because finding teachers out here is harder than finding gold." He chuckled at his own joke. "Board of Trustees meets Saturday. Come by town hall at 10 and we'll make it official." Mary felt dazed as she and Wyatt left the restaurant. "I can't believe it happened so quickly." "Small towns," Wyatt said with a shrug. "When they need something, they don't waste time with formalities." They spent the rest of the afternoon collecting supplies, Wyatt needed and purchasing a few essentials for Mary with the small advance Mayor Bennett had given her. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Mary realized Wyatt had made no mention of taking her to the schoolteacher's cabin. "Mr. Thornton," she began as they loaded the last of the supplies into the wagon, "I appreciate all you've done, but I should probably see about staying in town now." "The mayor mentioned the cabin. It's been empty for months," Wyatt interrupted. "Probably needs cleaning, repairs. At least stay at the ranch until after the board meeting makes everything official." He paused, then added, "Mrs. Hernandez would be disappointed if you left so soon. She's already talking about teaching you to make tortillas." Mary hesitated, torn between her desire for independence and the comfort of the Thornton ranch. "Just until Saturday," she conceded. Wyatt smiled, and something warm unfurled in Mary's chest at the sight. "Just until Saturday," he agreed. The next few days fell into a pleasant rhythm. Mary helped Mrs. Hernandez with household tasks, learning more practical skills than she had in all her years in Boston. In the evenings, Wyatt would return from working the ranch, and they would share dinner together, talking about their days. Mary found herself looking forward to these conversations, to Wyatt's dry humor and thoughtful insights. On Friday, Mrs. Hernandez announced she needed to visit her sister in a neighboring town and would be gone overnight. Mary immediately felt uncomfortable at the prospect of being alone at the ranch with Wyatt, but the housekeeper waved away her concerns. "Wyatt is a gentleman, Nina. And besides, he will be busy with the cattle all day. His foreman is sick, so he is doing double work." Sure enough, Mary barely saw Wyatt that day. He left before dawn and didn't return until well after she'd prepared a simple supper using the skills Mrs. Hernandez had taught her. When he finally came through the door, he looked exhausted, his clothes dusty and his face lined with fatigue. He stopped short when he saw the table set and food waiting. "You didn't have to do this," he said, clearly surprised. Mary shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "It seemed only fair with all the hospitality you've shown me." Wyatt washed up quickly, and they sat down to eat. The meal was simple roast chicken, potatoes, and corn, but he complimented it generously. "Mrs. Hernandez has been teaching you," he observed. "She's very patient," Mary said with a smile, "though I think she despairs of my ever-mastering tortillas." "Took me years to get them right," Wyatt admitted. "And even now, mine aren't as good as hers." The image of this tall, rugged cowboy patting out tortilla dough made Mary laugh, a sound that seemed to surprise both of them. After dinner, instead of retiring to separate rooms as they usually did, they found themselves lingering by the fireplace. The spring nights were still cool, and the crackling fire cast a warm glow over the cozy living room. "Tomorrow's the board meeting," Wyatt said, breaking a comfortable silence. Nervous, Mary nodded. "A little. It's strange, a week ago I was coming west to be a wife. Now I'm about to become a teacher in a town where the only person I know is you. You'll meet others," Wyatt said. "Clearwater has good people. Once they get to know you, you'll have more friends than you can count." "And you?" Mary asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "Are we friends, Mr. Thornton?" Wyatt looked at her for a long moment, the firelight reflecting in his blue eyes. "I'd like to think so, Miss Stone." There was something in his voice, something that made Mary's heart beat a little faster. She looked down at her hands, uncertain how to respond. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally. "That day by the river, you could have ridden past." Wyatt leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "I saw someone in trouble, that's reason enough." He paused, but when I got closer, when I saw it was you, he shook his head slightly. Something just felt right about stopping, like I was supposed to be there. The simple honesty of his words touched Mary deeply. "I'm glad you did." They talked long into the night, sharing stories of their lives before they met. Mary told him about growing up in Boston, the daughter of a bookkeeper who had lost his position when his eyesight began to fail. She explained how she'd answered Jacob Miller's advertisement, seduced by the promise of open spaces and a fresh start. Wyatt spoke of his childhood on the ranch, of learning to ride before he could walk, of his father's dreams for the land and his mother's gentle wisdom. He told her about the hardship after his parents died, how he'd nearly lost the ranch before turning things around. "It's strange," Mary said as the fire burned low. "A week ago my life was completely different, but sitting here now it almost feels like this is where I was always heading." Wyatt's eyes met hers and something electric passed between them. Maybe it was. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Mary dressed carefully in her best remaining dress for the board meeting, her stomach fluttering with nerves. When she emerged from her room, Wyatt was waiting, dressed in clean clothes with his hair neatly combed. "You look nice," he said simply, but the appreciation in his eyes made her cheeks warm. "Thank you," she replied, smoothing her skirt. "So do you." The drive to town was quiet, both of them seemingly lost in their own thoughts. Mary found herself watching Wyatt's profile as he guided the horses, noting the strength in his hands and the determined set of his jaw. The board meeting went exactly as planned. The trustees, 5 of the town's leading citizens, were impressed with Mary's education and demeanor, and they unanimously approved her appointment as Clearwater's new schoolteacher. They gave her a set of keys to both the schoolhouse and the small cabin behind it, along with a contract to sign. "School starts Monday week," Mayor Bennett informed her. "That gives you time to settle in and prepare. The previous teacher left her lesson books, and there's a small library at the school." Afterward, Wyatt suggested they visit both buildings so Mary could see her new home and workplace. The schoolhouse was a simple but sturdy one-room building with rows of desks, a teacher's desk on a raised platform, and a blackboard covering one wall. Bookshelves lined the back of the room, filled with well-worn volumes. "What do you think?" Wyatt asked as Mary walked slowly around the room, running her fingers along the desks. "It's perfect," she said, surprised to find she meant it. This wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself, but standing here, she could see the possibilities stretching before her. She could make a difference here, could build something meaningful. The cabin behind the school was smaller than she'd expected, just one room with a bed, a table and chairs, a small stove, and a washstand. But it was clean and solid, with curtains at the windows and a colorful quilt on the bed. "It's cozy," Wyatt observed, standing in the doorway as if reluctant to enter what was now her private space. "Yes," Mary agreed, though after the warmth and comfort of the Thornton ranch, the cabin seemed very small and very lonely. "I can make it home." Something flickered in Wyatt's eyes, regret, perhaps, or something deeper. But he merely nodded. "I'll help you move your trunk in tomorrow. On the ride back to the ranch, Mary was quieter than usual, her mind full of conflicting emotions. She had secured a position, a place to live, a future in Clearwater. She should have been elated. Instead, she felt a curious emptiness, as if she were losing something precious just as she was gaining her independence. Mrs. Hernandez had returned by the time they arrived, and she insisted on preparing a special dinner to celebrate Mary's new position. As they ate, Mary tried to match the housekeeper's enthusiasm, but she couldn't help noticing that Wyatt seemed as subdued as she felt. After dinner, Mary retreated to the porch, wrapping herself in the coat Wyatt had given her that first day, the coat she had somehow never returned. The night was clear, stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds on black cloth. She heard the door open behind her and knew without turning that it was Wyatt. He came to stand beside her at the railing, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him but not quite touching. "Beautiful night," he said softly. "Yes," Mary agreed, looking up at the stars. "We never saw stars like this in Boston, too many lamps, too much smoke." "One of the things I love about this place," Wyatt said, "the sky feels endless." Silence stretched between them, comfortable yet charged with unspoken words. "Mary," Wyatt began, the use of her first name sending a thrill through her. "I know you're set to move into the cabin tomorrow and I respect your independence, but I wanted to say—" He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "These past days, having you here, it's been, I know," Mary interrupted, her heart pounding. "For me too." He turned to face her then, his eyes serious in the starlight. "I'm not good with words like this, but I think I was meant to find you that day, by the river." Mary's breath caught in her throat. "Wyatt, let me finish," he said gently. "I know it's fast. I know you came here to marry someone else and that didn't work out. I know you're just getting your feet under you. But I can't let you go tomorrow without telling you that I've fallen for you, Mary Stone. And if you need time, I'll wait. If you want to be just friends, I'll respect that. But I had to say it." The naked honesty in his words moved her deeply. Without thinking, Mary reached out and touched his face, feeling the roughness of his beard against her palm. "I came west to marry a man I knew only through letters," she said softly. "A man who turned out to be a lie. But then I met a real man, one who gave me his coat when I was cold, who helped me when I needed it most, who saw me as a person, not just a mail-order bride." She took a deep breath. "I've fallen for you too, Wyatt Thornton, and it terrifies me how quickly it happened." The smile that spread across his face was like the sunrise, brilliant and full of promise. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, and Mary found herself melting into his embrace, her arms sliding around his neck as his hands came to rest at her waist. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Wyatt pressed his forehead to hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not as my guest. Not as someone I'm helping. Stay because you want to be here with me." Mary knew she should be cautious, should take time to think, should guard her heart after how easily it had been broken by false promises. But looking into Wyatt's eyes, she saw no deception, only hope and affection and a future she suddenly wanted more than anything. "Yes," she whispered back. "I'll stay." Morning found them sitting on the porch again, watching the sun rise over the Thornton ranch. Mrs. Hernandez had been ecstatic when they'd shared their decision the night before, declaring that she had known from the first moment she saw them together that they were meant for each other. "So what happens now?" Mary asked, her hand in Wyatt's. "I still have the teaching position." "And you should keep it," Wyatt said firmly. "You'll be wonderful at it. We can make it work. The ranch isn't that far from town." "A proper courtship," Mary mused, smiling. "How conventional of us." Wyatt laughed, squeezing her hand. "I don't think there's anything conventional about how we met. Or how quickly we fell for each other." "No," Mary agreed, "but it feels right, doesn't it? Like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be." Wyatt looked out over his land, then back at the woman beside him. "When I found you by the river that day, shivering and alone, all I wanted to do was help. I never imagined I was finding the woman I'd fall in love with. And I never imagined that being abandoned by my fiancé would lead me to something real. Mary leaned her head against his shoulder. Sometimes the best things come from the worst moments. As the sun climbed higher, painting the valley in gold, Mary thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had come west seeking a husband, a home, a new beginning. She had found all three, though not in the way she'd expected. Jacob Miller's betrayal had led her to Wyatt Thornton, to this ranch, to a life that already felt more authentic than the fantasy she'd built around a stranger's letters. "What are you thinking?" Wyatt asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Mary smiled, looking up at the man who had wrapped her in his coat and, unwittingly, his heart. "I'm thinking that sometimes you have to get lost to find where you truly belong." Wyatt nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And where do you belong, Mary Stone?" She didn't hesitate. "Right here." "With you." He kissed her then, a promise sealed in the light of a new day. And Mary knew, with a certainty that filled her heart to bursting, that this was just the beginning of their story, a story that had started with a shivering bride at her riverbank and a cowboy's act of kindness, and would continue for all the days to come.